Aikwe, Neknamalita, and this is my channel, The Midnight Librarian. Today I will be doing the nonfiction book tag. So I just kind of decided to do this tag because we're entering November, which is like kind of just known as Nonfiction November, though hopefully we can also kind of push Indigathon as well. And I feel like my nonfiction reading has been kind of going up in the last couple of years. So figured I'd try this out. Hopefully I can continue on with nonfiction. And yeah, let's see how it goes. So this book tag was created by abookolive. No one tagged me in it. I just felt like I wanted to do it. I will leave her channel and as well as the original tag video down in the description down below if you want to check it out, as well as the entire playlist that she's collected of the nonfiction book tag, if you wanted to find any other nonfiction booktubers. Also, I want to apologize. I'm getting over a cold. I have some congestion, so if I am a little nasally, I apologize. Bear with me. Question 1 is, how much nonfiction do you read? Upon looking at my stats for this year, it's up to a quarter. I know that typically I tend to read one to three nonfiction books a month. It's a great audibly. I love listening to nonfiction books. So, and I feel like that's steadily kind of growing as I get more interested and particularly kind of hone in on the nonfiction books that I'm interested in. Question 2 is, what kind of nonfiction videos do I want to make on Booktube? Currently, I feel like I want to do more nonfiction reviews. I know that's a little harder to do for nonfiction, as it's more relying on the writing style and how I perceive the book as opposed to like character development or plot. And maybe sometimes that's easier. I'm not sure. But ultimately, I do want to do more nonfiction reviews. As I do believe there's like kind of a stigma with nonfiction that it's like not fun or a bit boring, but much like Olive from abookolive, I just believe that it's because they haven't found the correct nonfiction for them. And kind of just want to like open up people's minds to more nonfiction. So that's what I kind of had in mind. I don't know really if there's any others I can really do outside of that. I'll have to think about that one. Question 3 is, what is my favorite subgenre of nonfiction? That's hard to choose just because there's so many that I'm finding that I'm interested in. Currently, I'm kind of focused in on food and marine life. So there's been a couple books I finished recently. If it has to do with like marine life at all, I'm in. If it has to do with food, I'm finding that I'm like, I tend to be hesitant because I don't necessarily want chef memoirs, but if it has to do with the food industry, I'm fairly curious about. But of course, like that, it depends on my mood as well, as that kind of tends to make me question everything that I'm buying. And there's a sense of guilt with that, but at the same time, we're only able to get what we're able to get. Also, anything Indigenous, I tend to pick up just out of general curiosity, but I'm also always kind of looking for how Indigenous people are perceived. I would love to pick up more nonfiction by Indigenous authors. However, that's easier said than done. I feel like a lot of even Indigenous nonfiction is a lot of it is written by non-Indigenous people, though I am finding that a lot of them are now being co-authored by Indigenous folks, or even as contributed to by Indigenous authors. So that's a pleasant surprise. I like a lot of subgenres, but and it really just depends. I do like a bit of the morbid side, but have yet to find it. But in general, I'm just kind of generally curious, so anything really. But those are the 3 I'm focused on right now. Question 4 is, do you have a favorite nonfiction book? Yes, I do. I read this earlier this year, and I'm sure that I have talked about it to death on my channel and will probably continue to do so. But that is Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer, Indigenous Wisdom, Scientific Knowledge, and the Teaching of Plants. I absolutely love this book. Thank you to Neil for sending me this gorgeous copy of it. I absolutely love it. This is published by Milkweed Books, and this recent edition was published this year, but it's been in production for a while. But basically, Robin Wall Kimmerer is a Potawatomi botanist and this is basically a collection of essays from her as she talks about Indigenous knowledge, how she kind of grew up with that, how she kind of shied away from it once becoming a botanist because they kind of essentially brainwashed her into thinking that that wasn't science. And now as a professor herself and teaching botany, how she's been able to incorporate her Indigenous knowledge with plant teachings, as well as how to restore and essentially teaching reciprocity when it comes to land and plants. I really enjoyed it. This book in particular came to me in a time in 2021 where I really needed it, so it was the right book in the right place. And like I said, I have not stopped talking about it. I absolutely love it. So you will see in my November TBR that I will try to push it on you multiple times. Question 5 is, what do you think keeps people from reading nonfiction? I honestly believe it's school. I was taught in elementary school to remember nonfiction as not fun. And that like bugs the heck out of me now that I'm an adult, and I remember always shying away from nonfiction because I figured it was not fun. And it wasn't until college that I really started exploring nonfiction, and even then I figured that I was kind of just lucking out and getting books that I particularly enjoyed. But now, as I'm out of college and am in a library, the university library of all places, constantly sending out articles, scholarly articles, as well as books for people's research, I'm constantly interested in seeing what others are researching, really. But when it comes to others not reading nonfiction, I do believe school kind of puts a deterrent on it, mostly because of how we learn to view nonfiction as either not fun or just kind of boring and droll, because there's, I think, a lack of creativity when it comes to required reading in schools, whether it's textbooks or fiction books that we are required to read. Yeah, I think there is a need for kind of a revamp of nonfiction books in teaching, but at the same time, I haven't been in school for years now, so who knows? I hope that it's taking a turn and people are getting more interested in nonfiction. Question 6 is, why do I like nonfiction? I like nonfiction because I can learn things. I have been a constant learner of various degrees, whether it's a new project or just new information, really. And really what I found with nonfiction is that I get better understandings of things. So like right now, I'm fairly particularly interested in the food industry and how we've come to eat what we're eating, how can we eat better, and how can we spend our dollars to promote a healthier lifestyle that everyone can access. So that's like, it's kind of like a domino effect. I read one thing and that caught my interest, and now I'm kind of just exploring these different branches that can come off it, and that's what I really enjoy, and that's kind of what like led me into nonfiction, is just this one little domino. So like even Braiding Sweetgrass, I would love to read more about botany, reading Below the Edge of Darkness by Edith Witter. I would love to know more about marine biology, reading Animal Vegetable Junk by Mark Bittman. Would love to know more about food. So it's just, I don't know, it's just interesting to me. It's just this kind of like, I say domino effect, but I'm almost wondering if it's more of like pulling the thread to get to the sweater of sorts. So I don't know. That's probably a dorky way of explaining it, but yeah. Question 7 is, what's a nonfiction you read because of Booktube? That would have to be Ace, What Asexuality Reveals About Desire, Society, and the Meaning of Sex by Angela Chen. This one was really interesting. A lot of nonfictions I tend to listen to first. And if it's something that I feel like I can refer back to later, I will purchase the physical copy, mostly because nonfiction books can be fairly expensive. So this one I listened to first, and I believe it was through a Libro FM credit that I originally got the audiobook, and then really enjoyed Angela Chen's writing, some of the references she was making, and ultimately the history that she was bringing up. And some of the points about society. So I got the physical version, and yeah, I really enjoyed it. I remember it being floated around on Booktube. I believe there's another one about, there's a couple others that I've been wanting to get to as well in terms of Booktube recommending nonfiction books. Question, was it 8? Yes, is what's the best nonfiction book that I've read lately? I feel like most of my nonfiction books I've read lately, but I would have to say, so I've mentioned this before, Animal Vegetable Junk by Mark Bittman. I recently just finished. You will hear more about it in my October wrap-up. But this one I recently finished, and it really just kind of opened my eyes on just how American the fucking agricultural food system is in America, and how that influenced the rest of the world, and how we kind of just refuse to listen to the rest of the world as they realize that our way of agriculture is terrible. But I really enjoyed Mark Bittman's writing in terms of, he does typically is a food writer in general, and a chef, I believe. But this one was like the history of agriculture, really, and how its effects have had lasting impacts on the world, and how it does have an impact on climate change. And what I really appreciated was that he talked about how Indigenous people essentially, like, there was, so one thing I tend to hesitate with some nonfiction is what viewpoint they're going after, or like who they'll include. So a lot of the times, a lot of nonfiction writers won't include Indigenous knowledge or perspective into their work, and they'll just leave it out entirely because they won't do the research, much like a lot of fiction. So, and that tends to bug the hell out of me, because I'm like, okay, where are our voices? Like, hello, we are still here, please talk to us. And what I appreciated about Mark Bittman is that he had those voices. He talked about how the history of Europe and how they came over, colonizers came over, how despite them thinking that we were doing nothing with the land here in the United States, or in the Americas, that we were in fact cultivating it to our, like, the best the best way that they ever could. And that really, it would make more sense to go back to that than what we're doing now, because of current agriculture is essentially the one that is in the result of climate change. So that's one thing I really enjoyed about his work. There was one thing that I particularly wanted, because he even talked about how California, as the westward expansion happened, how California became the result of, like, oh, well, this is a perfect place to farm. We just need to make sure we water everything, and how they dug into the Sacramento River and all that. But there was also, like, not just that, I wanted him to push it further into, like, you know, like the problems with that and the problems we have with that, because we are dealing with that currently up here in the North Coast, or in Northern California, as southern central farms need more water because they're essentially in what is considered a desert now. And they've used up their water, so they're getting ours, and how that affects treaty rights as well as water rights here in the local area. Though I understand that his book was what it was, and that there's only so much you can fit into that, so I guess I kind of forgive him for that, but I feel like he could have gone more into that perspective, really. So, yeah. Also, it's just nice, too, when it comes to nonfiction books and climate change, or any books and climate change, there's not always like a happy ending to it. There's always like, we need to do this before we die. And that's one thing with Mark Bittman's book, was that it didn't end like that. It ended more of like, oh, this is what we're currently doing. If we can keep doing this, this would be great. So it's like, that was like a positive that I really enjoyed. Question 9 is, what are some of my nonfiction reading goals? Like I said, doing more reviews on nonfiction books, expanding my nonfiction library of sorts. Right now it's pretty much at half a shelf. Just, yeah, there's some more. I would like more. I have this idea, maybe this goes to the what I like to create on Booktube. I have this idea of doing like almost discussions on Booktube in terms of videos after reading so many books about a certain theme, in terms of when it comes to nonfiction or even like fiction, really, of just like, I would like to do, if you liked this fiction book, maybe you'll like this nonfiction book. So kind of that idea, but as well as like after reading so many books, say about, I had this idea for like bees, of after reading Our Native Bees by Paige Embry, I had this idea of like reading a couple of books about bees and then giving my thoughts about what I learned. So I don't know if that's at all interesting to people, but I think it's interesting. I don't know. I don't know if that's basically just essentially creating my own essay and then like saying it, like videotaping it and putting it out on YouTube. But we'll see. And which I think is really funny, because essays were one of the worst things that I could ever do in school. Like, I hated them. So the fact that I'm thinking about just voluntarily doing it just on my own time seems really like outlandish to me. Like, who am I? I said reading goals, nonfiction reading goals. I don't read more, I guess. I'm pretty good with the quarter that I'm currently reading. If I could get that to about a third, I'd probably be really happy. I don't think it needs to be half. But that's just how I feel. But yeah, I would love to be able to, so there are some nonfiction books that I purchased without listening to first, which I should probably get to. And that's probably one thing that I hope to do in 2022, is read more of my physical copies of nonfiction books. Though I think I'm going to try to start that in November with some of the library books that I currently have out. So, and question 10 is, what's some advice for incorporating more nonfiction into your reading diet? Ultimately, find something you're interested in. I found a list on Goodreads, and I can link it down below. And basically, I just kind of scoured through it to see if there was anything I'd be interested in. And there is so much I would like to be interested in. Like, I am interested in. I'm pretty sure I added 2 pages onto my Goodreads TBR list. So, like, just look for things that you're interested in, really, because there is nonfiction about everything and anything. If you're into acting or actors or celebrities, like, pick up someone's memoir. If you like podcasts, like, find a book that's similar to a podcast you like. I'm sure that there's a couple of podcasts out there that have books. I know that if you like My Favorite Murder, Georgia Hardsark and Karen Galgarip have a book that's out already called Stay Sexy and Don't Get Murdered, which is narrated by them. I believe that Last Podcast on the Left has a couple of books out. If you're into true crime at all, I know that one book that I'm constantly thinking of is I'll Be Gone in the Dark by Michelle McNamara. That was a really interesting true crime nonfiction book that I read, that I was just like, oh my god, this is an intense, like, episode, like, podcast episode, which they later turned into a docuseries, which was still great to watch even after listening to the book. I still need to get that one physically. That's one problem with reading it. Listening to it first is that then it's like, well, I already read it, so I don't necessarily need the physical copy. But I'll Be Gone in the Dark is definitely one I still want physically. I just have yet to do it because I see these other books that I want to obtain too. So it's just finding something you're interested in, really. And that was one thing, like, I know that really it can be said with any book, that just find something you're interested in. But it's just like, I mean, even if you're interested in other books, like if you're interested in fantasy or something, like, or if like you're a D&D player, like, there's, like I said, there's nonfictions about everything. I believe I listened to a D&D, I think it, yeah, D&D history book, history nonfiction book last year. It was pretty interesting. So I don't know, just find it, like just Google it. And that's what I found in the beginning, is that if I thought of it more as a podcast and kind of listened to it like chapters at a time, it felt easier. And then over time, I'm just like, I read some of my nonfiction audiobooks faster than my physical book, smaller fictional books, physically. So just because I want to know. And then the bonus is to give a recommendation for nonfiction booktube channels that I love. I don't think I have any. So I'll be looking at this playlist too. So to see, I think I've been talking too long. I'm starting to get a tickle in my chest that it won't go away. So I think that's it for me today. That is the Nonfiction Book Tag by Olive, created by Olive from abookolive. If you have any nonfiction that you think I would like, please leave it in the comments down below. I'm always kind of curious. I'm always pretty curious about nonfiction books. If you've read any of the ones that I've listed, let me know your thoughts. Otherwise, be sure to give this video a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button if you have yet to do so already, the little bell icon to get notified when I post more content, and I hope that you are in the mental mindset to enjoy your reading. I will see you in another video very soon. Ciao!